Hi, my name is Jack Collins, and this is my project on the space race. The space race was a rivalry between the Soviet Union and the US for the development and innovations of space technology and exploration. It was between 1955 and 1975, and it is one of the most symbolic representations of the Cold War. The US and the Soviet Union both captured German rocket engineers and certain technology that was essential for space travel. To start it off, in 1957, the Soviet Union launched their first satellite, Sputnik 1, into orbit. This was the spark that started the space race. The US launched their first satellite, Explorer 1, into orbit 4 months after. The Americans were shocked that the Soviets beat them to space, and they made changes in their educational system because they thought this proved that the Soviets' educational system was better than theirs. The Soviets had the upper hand here yet again, because they beat the US. In 1961, the Soviets put the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin. Shortly after this, JFK announced that it is America's goal to be the first country to put a man on the moon. That goal was fulfilled on July 20th, 1969, with Neil Armstrong being the first man on the moon. Finally, America had beaten the Soviets in something. There were failed moon landing attempts between 1969 and 1972 by the Soviets. The mission was not as popular, and they lost interest. America won the space race by stepping foot on the moon, but the Soviets were the first to accomplish many things before America and were the true pioneers of space exploration. There were many accomplishments by the Soviets that were achieved before America. Some significant ones were the launch of Sputnik 1, the first animal in space, the first rocket ignition in Earth orbit, which was the first man-made object to escape Earth's gravity, Luna 1, the first probe to impact the moon, Luna 2, the first person in space and in Earth orbit, Yuri Gagarin on Vostok 1, the first probe launched to Mars, Mars 1, the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, the first probe in lunar orbit, Luna 10, and an interesting one is the first living beings to reach the moon and return unharmed to Earth, Russian tortoises and other life forms. You would think of America, but technically the first living beings on the moon were tortoises by the Russians. There are many more accomplishments as well. Not only did the Soviets face great accomplishments, but they also faced failures and fatal incidents. For example, in 1960, a fueled rocket exploded while being tested on a launch pad. It killed many engineers, technicians, and personnel who were working on the project. Another failure was when a cosmonaut named Valentin Bodarenko died in a fire during training. The government covered up his death until 1980. There is now a crater on the far side of the moon named after him. Another is while the Soviets were trying to achieve a moon landing, the N-1 rocket exploded on each of 4 uncrewed tests shortly after launch. A significant one is when 3 men died during the Soyuz 11 mission. These men are the only men in history to die in outer space. There are even more failures than that, but for the sake of time, I won't go through them all. The Americans obviously also faced accomplishments as well as failures. Some accomplishments were the first solar-powered satellite, the first communication satellite, the first satellite in a polar orbit, the first photograph of Earth from orbit, the first spacecraft to impact the far side of the moon, the first Mars flyby, the 84-day human crewed space record, the first Jupiter flyby, and the first Mercury flyby, and of course, the first humans on the moon. Some of their failures were actually quite whimsical. For example, Mercury Redstone 1 flew a total of 4 inches and settled back on the launch pad. Mercury Atlas 7 missed its landing target by 250 miles. Other failures include Gemini 8, which was the first in-space disaster which required the mission to be aborted. Also, the disaster of January 1967, when a fire broke out while testing the Apollo Command Module. Throughout these failures and successes, billions of dollars were spent. The money spent by both sides on the space race, like most big project endeavors, can be argued as a waste or the cost of progress. The US ultimately won the space race primarily because of its capitalistic system. The Soviet system could not rely on a private tax-based financial supply. It is hard to put a specific value on all the scientific advances achieved and easy to just look at the money spent as wasted. Similar to the Vancouver Olympics, these large projects are sometimes the only way to get big things done. Space exploration lets us come closer to figuring out where we come from. With the help of advancing technology, mankind gets closer and closer to figuring out these things every day. The space race produced numerous heroes and legends and pushed the boundaries of human capabilities. We would not be where we are today without the mission that started the space race, Sputnik 1. This revolutionary feat sent the world into the space age. The first human-made object in Earth's orbit opened up many possibilities. A couple years later, another significant mission changed the history of space exploration, Vostok 1, the mission that sent the first human in space. Not only did this show the superiority of socialism over capitalism, but it also showed the brilliance of humans. With the intelligence of scientists and motivation of cosmonauts, Vostok 1 drove humans to achieve more and more in space exploration. This led to the greatest feat in space exploration and one of the greatest achievements of mankind, Apollo 11. Kennedy's goal was achieved on July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon while the whole world watched in awe. This event represents what America is capable of and left its footprint, literally, in history as one of the most important technological and monumental events. Most people assume the space race ended in 1969 with the moon landing, but that's not the case. In fact, it is being continued today. But unlike the past race, it isn't as competitive. Countries are cooperating and congratulating other countries on their endeavors in space. Countries like India, Israel, France, Japan, Brazil, Iran, Algeria, and Nigeria have all sent satellites or rockets to space. China is the first country to have landed on the far side of the moon in January 2019. Many nations have their own goals, and with technology being at an all-time high, these goals are very possible. On NASA's website, it says in 2020, NASA will be taking long strides towards returning astronauts to the moon, continuing the exploration of Mars and developing new technology to make supersonic aircrafts fly more quietly. NASA also predicts there will be people on Mars in the next 25 years. Because of that, companies like Buy Mars and Lunar Embassy are allowing people to buy land on Mars. Deeds go from $30 to $500. It is believed to be a scam, though, because it is stated that no country owns any territory in space or any property on Mars, so therefore you cannot buy it from anybody. Although there is a space race between countries, so to speak, there is another space race between the richest men in the world. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Richard Branson are in a space race. Bezos' Blue Origin and Branson's Virgin Galactic are considering space tourism flights in 2020, and Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, is planning trips to the International Space Station. Bezos' goal is to have a civilization on a different planet in fear of the Earth's civilization ending. His Blue Origin capsule, New Shepard, will hold 6 passengers and travel 4 times the speed of sound. Now in Branson's case, he's doing it because he wants space tourism to be available for everybody. His rocket, the VSS Unity, has been successfully tested with 3 people. It doesn't perform as well as the New Shepard, but it definitely gives passengers the space experience. 600 people have prepaid $250,000 to go to space on the VSS Unity. SpaceX has built reusable rockets and a space capsule for space tourism. Musk's goal is to get humans to live on another planet. They have not launched anyone yet, but 2020 might be the year. Similar to Blue Origin, SpaceX has not sent anyone to space yet. So in theory, it is a space tourism race. While these billionaires have their visions for the future, what about NASA? NASA has 15 future missions, including Mars 2020, the Lunar Flashlight, and Europa Clipper. The goal of Mars 2020 is for the Mars rover to obtain different rock and soil samples like they have done in the past, but as well as finding certain areas that may have had evidence of past life. They will put these samples in sample tubes and send them to certain locations for a direct retrieval to Earth. The Lunar Flashlight mission has a goal to map the south pole of the Moon for volatiles and also use lasers to look for water and ice. It will also use near-infrared lasers to shine light into shaded regions of the Moon. Lastly, the Europa Clipper. NASA's Europa Clipper will perform a thorough identification of Jupiter's moon, Europa, and examine whether the icy moon is habitable for humans. The space race has been one of the most significant events to ever occur in world history, and has opened the door for space exploration and has truly shown the capabilities of humans. Hopefully, the technological advances and research being done by these independent space companies will help directly or indirectly solve our fossil fuel dependency. The cost of lifting these rockets out of the atmosphere is enormous, and research into alternative propulsion methods is necessary to make space travel more economical. Thank you for listening.